This is the 7th outing in a week for the joint Kenyan-Chinese underwater archaeology team. It's winter in China, but it's scorching hot here on the ocean near the equator. Here on the east coast of Africa, the sunlight reaches many meters below the ocean surface, creating excellent visibility for the underwater archaeologists. The scene underwater is like a secret fantasy world. But the divers are looking for an ancient shipwreck and show no interest in the other relics of human civilization littering the seabed. The search drags on, with no encouraging signs of their prize. But just as the divers are coming out of the water, the sonar on the ship indicates the presence of an object. Guided by the sonar signal, the archaeologists suddenly come upon a huge object sticking out of the ocean floor. It's covered by a thick layer of gunk and sea creatures and shaped like a colossal hook. Based on a preliminary survey, they believe it's probably the anchor of a huge ship. As usual, Jefford and Fa Mao are ready at daybreak to go out to sea. They're very familiar with the mangrove-covered beach here. The mangroves, which are unique to tropical coastal areas, have roots under the water that provide a rich source of nutrients for the many schools of fish that inhabit this quiet harbor. The waters far from the coast are only calm on the surface. Most people would be hesitant to face the dangers in the ocean depths, but Jefford and Fa Mao are fearless. The tropical ocean is teeming with things of commercial value, but harvesting them is far from easy. With no diving equipment, Jefford and Fa Mao can dive to the bottom more than 20 meters below, subjecting their bodies to twice the pressure on the surface. They must hold their breath for 3 or 4 minutes, much longer than an average person can. They have trained to maximize this skill so they can survive those long dives. As they explore the ocean bottom, they become one with this exotic world and move around as naturally as birds in the sky. Jefford and Fa Mao even enter perilous crevices in search of their prey. If they are lucky, they'll find a devil ray. It's a valuable catch, but extremely dangerous because of the poisonous barbs on its tail. The first thing they do after catching one is to remove the barbs. This is the east coast of Africa, where the lifestyle is very familiar to ordinary Kenyans. People lead simple lives that are in harmony with the ocean. This may be the space between heaven and earth, where the people are most in tune with nature. They sometimes encounter human artifacts at the bottom of the ocean. These relics from the past greatly pique their curiosity. This is an ordinary public school on the outskirts of Nairobi. Children begin their 8 years of basic education at the age of 6. Kenyan children have been participating in this ceremony at the start of every school day since the country achieved independence 50 years ago. The children may not understand the significance of the national flag and anthem, but that period of history has had a profound impact on them.
The ship itself was made in Portugal, where the captain of the ship sits or stays, and this is slightly down. Then in 1502,
the teacher tells his students how the Portuguese first came to Africa. This is their first introduction to the country's history, and in the mind of most Kenyans, the arrival of the Portuguese was the beginning of this land's civilization.
They were not received well at Mombasa.
In 1498, Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama arrived at the east coast of Africa, marking the beginning of centuries of colonial history. It was long the prevailing opinion in many countries of the world that it was Westerners who brought civilization to Kenya. But many Kenyans had always wondered how the history of this ancient land only consisted of a few centuries of colonialism.
I think it goes very, very much deep. You know, it is beyond what the Europeans have said. I tend to differ with that perspective because I think this country was inhabited very, very many years ago. And these people who lived here, they had their own history. Although this was not written, but I believe they must have had at some point their own history.
This is the Kenya everyone knows, the birthplace of the human race. A beautiful, spacious, and wild land. But when we look past this image and take a probing look at history, a hitherto unknown world comes into view. It's December 4th, 2012, a calm and peaceful day here on Lamu Archipelago on Kenya's east coast. The 12 Chinese archaeologists have arrived to join the joint Kenyan-Chinese expedition. They hope to find relics that will tell many previously unknown stories from Kenya's past.
所有的遗址分布呢是顺这个水道，大家也都看到这个水道，水道转过来的时候有点偏西，我都已经说过了。带16个气瓶，所有的潜水装备，包括所有的这些 涉及到工作的绳子、铅砣，一切的东西都先运到海边。明天上午呢9点钟准时出发。
The members of the team are all acutely aware of the importance of this mission as a bilateral joint project. The agreement known as the Sino-Kenya Joint Archaeological Project was signed on February 23, 2010. The purpose of the project is to resolve some of the mysteries of this land, in particular, the local legends about stranded Chinese sailors. The Kenyan people have long awaited the chance to work with the Chinese through a cultural assistance program. There is a legend in Kenya that a Chinese ship sank near Lamu Archipelago about 600 years ago, and that there were survivors. The descendants of those Chinese sailors, who purportedly married local women, still live in Kenya. If the legend is true, it would be an early link between China and Kenya, two geographically distant countries. The bright fire lights up Mwamaka's face as she makes her daily batches of mandazi. Mandazi is a popular triangular fried snack sprinkled with sugar. Her sole source of income is the money she makes selling them every day in front of her house, so she has to make a lot of them. Her life does not seem to differ much from that of the other island residents. But Mwamaka firmly believes that she is one of the descendants of those Chinese sailors.
Mama waliniachia nikiwa mdogo, nikachezea mpaka nikafika. Alafu na sahi naendelea nacho, geni akiwa anamwonyesha mama akiwa kama
There are over 50 island residents who believe that they have a Chinese ancestor. Since there are only 2 cars on the island, donkeys are the most important form of transportation, so it's also known as Donkey Island. The residents here live, work, and relax in the same ways as their ancestors. According to historical records, about 600 years ago, Zheng He's fleet reached the east coast of Africa, probably the first time for a Chinese ship to cross the ocean. According to local legend, the wrecked ship was part of Zheng He's fleet. Lamu Archipelago actually consists of Lamu Island, Paddy Island, and 3 others. It was once an important trading center, but there is very little mention of this historical period in written records. Nevertheless, you can see its influence in the lives of the locals. The day after arriving at Lamu Archipelago, the archaeologists head to Shanga village on Paddy Island. According to local legend, this is where the Chinese sailors reached shore. The archaeologists first visit the home of a local family.
Kuna kitu ni kujenga kwa udongo, kwa majiwe. Basi ndicho cha zamani tutoka.
Nyumbani hamna kitu toka zamani.
Watu wanategemea fishing kwa samaki, lakini siku za mvua wengine wanaenda baharini au majani.
Kiwanja tu,
msitu tu.
Hamna kitu chochote.
The archaeologists are not surprised at the answers. From years of experience, they know that clues aren't always easy to track down. But the head of the next family they visit takes out a well-preserved bowl that appears to have come from China. Then they ask about the Chinese shipwreck that allegedly occurred here about 600 years ago.
中国他会知道多少呢？说跟故事的话，这个是我们主要是想知道这个是真的还是假的，或者是说有多少可能性是真的。
Zamani hizo sijui zamani hizo.
Hamna pata historia?
The lack of progress does not dishearten the archaeologists. They realize that Mwamaka still might have some information. When they see her porcelain bowl, they know that they're perhaps holding the key to the mystery.
也3倍，4代就是150年左右，100多年。这个纹饰吧，我们看着还不太像是我们国内的，不太像我们国内的纹饰。
Mwamaka's bowl is a big letdown for the archaeologists. But then they get a new lead. They hear about some ancient Chinese graves on the island.
肯定是一个阿拉伯字连过来的，跟我们中国的这种墓碑的话是完全不同的。因为我们那种墓碑的形式的话，形成时间也很长了。如果说是你是这个中国人来，我们中国人对祖先是最尊重的，所以说他不可能说把自己死后的墓碑做的跟这种阿拉伯人的墓碑放一个样子，他肯定是要做自己风格。
The archaeologists spend the whole day talking to people in Shanga village, but find no leads to the Chinese shipwreck or its survivors. This is the exact spot where locals claim the Chinese sailors reached shore. They have still found no clues that indicate the shipwreck actually happened. Meanwhile, another archaeological team is beginning their dig on land 150 kilometers away in Mambre village, Malindi, Kenya's third largest city. This dig is also an important part of this project. The people of Kenya and China are happy to be working together on this project. This land beneath their feet is certainly not ordinary. Locals suspect that some of Kenya's history is buried underground in the form of ancient Malindi, a prosperous city that existed for centuries before the arrival of the European colonialists. The archaeologists are hoping to find evidence that will change the current view of the history of Kenyan civilization.
这是看这道线，这都是一道墙。它这个肯尼亚国家，它没有砖，砌墙时候都是这个海里边这个珊瑚礁，这都以前的墙泥出来了，看这都往这边过来了。
Near the Mambre site is a famous mosque known as the Kuba Mosque. Historical records indicate that Zheng He's crew saw a huge mosque as they approached the place called Malindi. The archaeologists are excited by the possibility that what they saw was the Kuba Mosque. Vanessa lives on the outskirts of the city she knows very well. Every few days, she walks over an hour to reach the city of Mombasa to buy supplies for making incense. Vanessa is well known far and wide for her incense. Most of the ingredients for the incense, such as sandalwood, cloves, and frankincense, come from Somalia and India. She is very familiar with all the ingredients. Vanessa learned to make incense from a Tanzanian woman 20 years ago. Water and sugar are first added to the finely ground materials in a big pot and brought to a boil with constant stirring to make a paste. When the paste is cooled, it is formed into incense. The painstaking process is carried out by hand and takes several hours. The key to making good incense is the correct ratio of ingredients and proper control of the heat. This method of making incense is traditional. The incense doesn't appear to be anything special, but when it is burned, its fragrance permeates people's clothes and even their skin. Kenyan women have been using incense for centuries, and the use of incense among the women is as common as the use of cosmetics. Incense was an important import commodity in ancient China. In 1974, a shipwreck from the southern Song dynasty was found in Quanzhou, Fujian province, with ancient incense-making materials in its cargo hold. Some of the cloves, frankincense, agar wood, and ambergris came from the east coast of Africa. Numerous archaeological finds have shown that when the maritime Silk Road was in operation, the Chinese mainly exported China, silk, and tea as far as the east coast of Africa. This means that the story of the Chinese shipwreck is historically plausible. Cesar Bitta, a member of the Joint Archaeological Team, is among the first in the country to search for the country's history underwater.
Me and you too?
After graduating from Nairobi University 10 years ago, he began researching Kenyan history. He is sure Kenyan history is far longer than what is known today. Cesar Bitta is a researcher at the National Museum of Kenya, which is dedicated to uncovering the country's maritime history. Lack of underwater archaeologists and equipment meant that their research relied on the accidental discoveries of fishermen. Cesar and his colleagues have long wanted to explore the ocean floor in search of their country's lost history. Cesar is well prepared for this project. 2 years ago, his Chinese colleagues taught him how to carry out underwater archaeological work. Underwater archaeological work is full of risks and uncertainties, so the archaeologists carefully examine all their equipment before each dive. They have carefully prepared for today's activity and are full of anticipation as they head toward the designated area. Underwater archaeology mainly employs 3 types of acoustic detection instruments to gather data. These instruments use reflected sound not only to explore the seabed, but to explore many meters below the seabed as well. The data points from the reflected waves are transformed into images in a computer. This helps archaeologists determine the size and depth of an object, as well as pinpoint its location. The team ship slowly follows the designated route. Suddenly, the sonar indicates an unusual shape resting on the ocean floor. But the dive turns up nothing. It could just be part of a reef that their equipment has mistakenly interpreted as a shipwreck. This is a common problem for underwater archaeology. The sea bottom is so complex that even the most advanced instruments cannot make a precise determination. The ship continues to head south. The archaeologists are forced to expand the search area. The sonar detects another strange object on the seabed, and everyone is anxious to see what it is. The divers find a dark-colored pottery shard embedded in the mud of the ocean floor. But small objects like this don't show up on sonar, so there is probably something bigger nearby. Then they find a pottery jar sticking up out of the silt near the first find. After lying on the seabed for who knows how many years, it will once again see the light of day. This is a beautifully shaped jar, covered by many centuries of sediment. From a preliminary inspection, the experts believe that it's from the 13th century or earlier. This could be a vestige of lost history buried on the ocean floor. The next discovery takes the archaeologist's breath away. Not far from the first discoveries is a large area covered by pottery vessels and shards. It seems like they are from a ship that sank centuries ago. But the pottery jars were not valuable goods, so it seems strange for a ship to carry so many of them. The method of making pottery in Kenya has changed little over the centuries. First, they grind stones into a fine powder and then mix it with clay in a set ratio. The clay is then shaped on a pottery wheel and left to dry for 2 days before firing in a kiln. Meanwhile, the archaeologists working in Mambre have made a discovery of their own. Not far from the Kuba Mosque, they found 17 pottery jars and a large quantity of pot shards. The soil layer indicates that the pottery came from the 12th or 13th century. Differently shaped jars with obviously different functions were found in different parts of the building. The finds lead them to speculate that this was once a residential area. People have used pottery since Neolithic times. The discovery of how to make pottery from water, earth, and fire greatly changed people's lives. But as new tools have constantly replaced older ones, along with technological progress, the use of pottery has declined in many parts of the world. But here in Kenya, the use of pottery is as popular as ever. Omi has already finished cleaning the restaurant before the sun rises and the city awakes. He arrives at the city's largest farmers market at 5 a.m. to purchase fresh vegetables for his Simba restaurant. As the head chef, he likes to select the ingredients himself to ensure the quality of all his dishes. Omi's best dish is biryani. Except for the beef, the ingredients were all originally from Asia and America, but they have become very popular here. The locally grown beef is first chopped up and boiled in water. When it's half done, the pureed vegetables are added together with garlic, curry, ketchup, and Indian seasonings, and stirred until everything is done. This dish has been influenced by the cuisine of Central and South Asia. But the people of many tribes still cook in their traditional way, using only salt to season the food. This is much closer to traditional African cuisine than biryani cuisine. Although this kind of cuisine is very common in Kenya, it's very different from traditional African food and different from the kind of Western food found in the big cities. Cuisine reflects the culture and life of the people as different civilizations meet and borrow from each other. Perhaps this land is not as simple as commonly believed. The Sabaki River crosses the densely forested Niika Plateau on its way to the Indian Ocean. Near its mouth, the river becomes wide and calm. Professor Chen Jian Li is exploring along the bank of the river. According to historical records, the ancient Malindi Kingdom was located by an estuary. The city's quality metal products made in a prosperous trade center on the east coast of Africa. Today, Malindi was only established in the 14th century, centuries after the legendary Old Malindi Kingdom disappeared from this area. Maybe the Malindi Kingdom was not located here. Professor Chen Jian Li has come to the river to see a discovery made at the Mambre site a few days ago. The archaeologists find a layer of earth with an unusual color, which they believe could mean the presence of metal. Magnetic tests indicate a large quantity of iron in the layer. Chen then comes up with a hypothesis based on his knowledge of the history of metallurgy.
你可以看到这里面有很多的这个铁矿石，它的这些初步判断可能是一个和锻铁有关的，把这个铁块做成器物的这样一个做法。
Locals still use traditional tools and techniques to make things of iron. This leads archaeologists to believe this traditional technology was also used at the Mambre site. But the source of the iron ore is still a mystery. The river nurtures life wherever it flows, and the Kenyans who live by the river benefit from this bounty, just as their ancestors did centuries ago. The wide muddy beach on the two sides of the Sabaki River at its mouth has a high concentration of black iron containing sand. Professor Chen believes that the sand containing iron ore probably came from the mine upstream from this site discovered in 2002. The river current washes the iron ore sand into the estuary, where ocean waves deposit it on the shore. After many years of accumulation, the beach mud became an important natural resource for the ancient metalworkers. The black sand is the link between the river and the Mambre site. Over the next few years, some large-scale metal workshops are discovered at other sites in Mambre. These sites, the large mosque and the residential area, seem to form the outlines of an ancient city. It seems likely that this is the ancient Malindi kingdom. Though today's city of Malindi is located at the mouth of the Sabaki River, the purported site of the ancient Malindi kingdom is nearly 10 kilometers from the estuary. The archaeologists speculate that unstable geological conditions at the estuary might have changed the river's course, causing the people to move to the south. After the new city of Malindi developed, the site of the ancient Malindi kingdom was abandoned and forgotten. Every day at 5 a.m., Imam Dukumi arrives at the prayer room of the Kuba Mosque to prepare for the morning service. An hour later, the local Muslims gather to pray, a tradition that is centuries old. Imam Dukumi, who is 58 years old, comes from a Muslim family, so he has been coming to the mosque since childhood. He also spent 4 years in Saudi Arabia, studying the history and teachings of Islam. Every morning before the villagers arrive, he sits by the window reading the Quran for 30 minutes. It's time for the service to begin. Imam Dukumi has been calling the local Muslims to prayer like this for many years.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة.
This is the first service of the day. Dukumi leads the villagers in the Muslim prayers. The ancient continent of Africa spawned the Kenyan people, who eventually became Muslims. The archaeologists find that the Kuba Mosque has been rebuilt several times since it was first constructed in the 13th century, long before the arrival of the European colonists. That era belongs solely to the people of Kenya. Today, the archaeologists are exploring along the bank of the river, working to uncover the mysteries of that past.